let's jump right into it.
Okay.
So coming out of college, what inspired you to want to contribute to AIDS research? Do you have any mentors, role models, or colleagues that maybe also inspired you?
I came out of college as a pharmacist and hated it and didn't want to spend my time arguing with customers about the price of prescriptions.
Mm-hmm.
I was introduced to my mentor, Dr. Stu Schlossman, at the Beth Israel at the time, and he had just come from the NIH, doing a whole bunch of work there on immunology research. And talking with him, I was very interested in what he was doing, and basically went to work with him doing immunology research on the basic level. This had nothing to do with the AIDS patients, but we stayed 5 years at the Beth Israel doing basic immunology research, talking about things like the antigen antibody combining set, working with strains of guinea pigs that were inbred to have certain characteristics, either for certain things or against, and we developed a whole bunch of rules that helped advance immunology research. After 5 years there, he transferred to the Dana-Farber, and I went with him. At this time, we started a collaboration with Culture Immunology and working with flow cytometers to measure different blood subsets in both humans and animals. It was doing this that we developed a bunch of monoclonal antibodies to help define subsets in both normal people, sick people, leukemia patients, lymphoma patients, etc. One of the things we found was a subset that we labeled T4, which diagnosed the helper cell in the normal blood, and another subset we called T8, which recognized what we call the killer cell.
Okay.
We made a lot of these antibodies and said, well, maybe these AIDS patients that are coming up from New York that we're getting blood from, to see if we can find anything in their blood that would help diagnose an AIDS patient, what the disease is, so they could better treat it earlier and find ways to help these patients. This intrigued us.
Okay.
And that's how we start getting all these patients from blood. And at that time, we weren't super careful because we didn't know it could be transmitted from just the blood to another person. But we did work with all their blood under hoods. We used sterile techniques whenever possible. Ran them through the machine, which sometimes would cause an aerosol, but would have that blocked, with fans that would suck it away. And when we did find in these patients, they had a very abnormal ratio of helper cells to killer cells. The normal person would have a 4-to-1 ratio of helper cells to killer cells, and the helper cells would be what to help you fight off any infection that you might have, a cold, pneumonia, anything. And the killer cells, if they became excessive, would take over and the disease would get worse. And that's what we found when we started looking at the AIDS patients. They had these huge imbalance of T4 to T8 cells, and that gave us, is there any way we can eliminate the abundance of T8 cells instead of the T4 cells? It wasn't very successful in doing that, but we did find a quick assay that could diagnose this problem, and became worldwide that people were doing this to help diagnose if the patient really had AIDS and to start them on a different regimen of medicine.
So would you label this as like your particular breakthrough during your research?
I think using developing monoclonal antibodies. We were one of the few labs in the beginning to do this. That was a big breakthrough, and then finding ways to use the monoclonal antibodies to help treat patients and help patients that was the biggest breakthrough, using these antibodies and diagnosing patients that nobody had any idea to do. And using this fluorescent flow cytometer, which Beck Dickinson was one of the labs that made it. Coulter Immunology was another one that made it. These were the only two companies that made it. And by us using it, they sold, Coulter Immunology was selling our monoclonal antibodies. They gave us the machines and new equipment to use to do this. And we had a great collaboration. And in doing this, I traveled all over the world, giving people seminars on how to make the monoclonal antibodies and use them, and how to use the flow cytometers as a method of diagnosing different types of blood.
So do you want to expand on your travels around the world, particularly your experience traveling to places like Paris and London?
There was a couple of times to go to international seminars where we would go and talk. The whole lab would go, and I would be one of the talkers to highlight how we use the flow cytometer as a means of diagnosing the patients. And one of the doctors would talk more about the medical aspects of it, and I would talk more about the mechanical aspects of how to use the machine to diagnose and how to label the monoclonal antibodies with different fluorescent dyes to do it.
And I know you touched on the flow cytometer. Were there any other instruments or pieces of equipment that were critical for your research?
What we used, Coulter had cell counters that would count the numbers of cells, like just normal, that were developed by Coulter himself. And so we could put a cell sample in there and find out how many cells were in the blood, so we would know how many cells we were dealing with, what was the maximum number we wanted to stain to get a good prep. So we would use a machine like that, and oftentimes they would look under a microscope to help diagnose different types of leukemias and lymphomas by cell shape
Kind of taking a step back, what would you just say like a typical day was like?
It was busy.
At Dana-Farber or Beth Israel, like how would like a typical day go?
You couldn't work on a time slot. You had to. I would basically get there between 8 to 8:30 in the morning. On a good day, I would finish at 5:30 or 6. On a bad day, it would be 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes when we did bone marrow transplants, it would take 12 to 14 hours to treat the patient's cells before we could infuse them back into the patient's body. And oftentimes we'd be there from 12 to midnight. And we had a team that would treat the patient's blood with another monoclonal antibody to get rid of all the T cells in the blood, including any cancer cells that might remain in the patient's body. Prior to that, the patient would go get total body irradiation to get rid of all of his cells. Then they would get the bone marrow from the patient. We would treat it with this particular monoclonal antibody to get rid of any remaining T cells, including any remaining T cells that might have been cancer cells that didn't get destroyed by the total body irradiation. That'd be treated. We'd run it through the flow cytometer, which would detect one cell in thousands. And they had to, if we saw it more than,
Is there an off chance the flow cytometer wouldn't detect that one cell?
No, it had to.
It had to.
They would light up and we would see it on, we would find maybe one cell in a million, and we'd run through, 100 million cells, and maybe at the end of that time, it would take an hour to run those cells through, and we'd find one. Statistically, you couldn't do better than that. And we would say that's it, and hope that cell eventually would die off on itself. The patient would get back his own bone marrow free, as free as could be. And most of them, you know, would go for years. You know, and the biggest, you know, thing that you appreciate is 6 months later when they come up to the lab and say, remember me, I'm so-and-so. We had never met them before, you know. You saved my life, you did the bone marrow transplant on me, and look at me today. And so that was so rewarding. I mean, that's made everything worthwhile.
Did you have like a particular patient or moment that really stuck out to you?
We had one leukemia patient that donated his blood, and he had a special kind of weird type of leukemia.
Yeah.
And we were able to take his blood and make a monoclonal antibody to that type of leukemia.
So he helped lead to a cure.
Yeah, well, it
Or
helped.
a treatment.
Yeah, it helped that we could then use that monoclonal antibody to test different types of people that have leukemia. Depending, if we found one that was positive to get the same leukemia that he had, by flow cytometry would react with the antibody that we made from his blood. They did a different kind of treatment for that type of leukemia that proved to be very successful. It helped him, and it helped a lot of other kids with that had that rare form of leukemia.
And I assume this was before Magic Johnson, correct?
Yeah, Magic Johnson with his AIDS way before.
So since Magic Johnson has happened and AIDS awareness has increased significantly since then, like, would you say, like, how has the research and the treatment expanded since that?
It's expanded more. They found better drugs and regimens to treat AIDS. They call their cocktails. And I guess depending on how the AIDS present, they determine what cocktail might work best. And if that doesn't work, they replace it with another one. It's all a lot of experimental stuff still going on. But they have the means now to start treating earlier.
Okay.
And some of the drugs that are proven a lot better than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They're much more effective against the disease.
So would you consider yourself a pioneer for AIDS research?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good way of putting it.
I also read in some of my own research that you worked with a Nobel Prize winner named Baruch.
Benacerraf.
Yeah.
He
So
was-
what was that experience like?
It was a mind-blowing experience.
Yeah.
He was the head of the biology department at Harvard Medical School. And he come from the head of the NIH in Washington, D.C. And had set up his own lab at the Harvard Medical School. My boss, Dr. Schlossman, when he was a medical student, worked at his lab at NYU, and that's where he got his training and interest in different types of research. It came a point in time when my boss decided to go on a sabbatical to work in some friends' labs in London, and he took off 9 months to keep me busy, because there wouldn't be that much to do in his own lab at the Dana-Farber. He found me out to Dr. Benacerraf at the medical school to work with him and to learn some new techniques that might be helpful to us in the research we were doing at the Farber. And I spent 9 months working with him, and he was the most brilliant guy imaginable. I mean, he was so smart and warm, and no trouble working with him.
And I know my mom is a doctor, and Uncle Eric also works with, Eric does cancer research as well, right?
He does more Alzheimer's research, I would say.
So would you say your experience with AIDS research and leukemia kind of influenced them to go into similar fields?
Yeah, I think my work at first as a pharmacist.
Yeah.
And then both of them actually, when they were in high school, both worked in drugstores as an aide,
Assistant.
You did too.
Yeah, but they worked, behind the pharmacy counter and would wait in customers. And I think that got them interested in another aspect of medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they went on, and my wife was a nurse, I was a medical research, and I think they just got the idea that this would be a great thing to contribute back to society.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you for
It was my
everything.
pleasure.
Thank you.
We enjoyed talking.
It was wonderful.
Okay.
You know what,